5 months ago today, Australians actually went to the polls. It was a choice then between a lifetime leftist leading Labor or an opportunistic chameleon leading the coalition. There certainly wasn't much policy difference between the Lib Labs, so, in my words, it pretty much descended into that political beauty contest. Well, unsurprisingly, faced with such an unpalatable choice, a huge swag of voters put their first preference elsewhere, outside of the major party. But the end result was Albanese, as we know, became Australia's 31st Prime Minister. Well, the 5 months since then has been characterised by pretty much nothing. I mean, really, I struggle to think of any substantive measure the government has actually taken to make our country better, more secure, or more prosperous and prepare us for the future. Not surprisingly, the professionally outraged for hire in the media and online, of course, they've gone largely silent because their preferred team are in charge. It's not those pesky right-wingers. And the rest of us, well, most of us are simply getting on with life to be too fussed about politics right now. I suspect that's all set to change with next week's budget. It will finally end the coalition blame game, where Labor can just say the coalition did this and did that, and it's going to put the onus firmly back on the government to solve some of the problems that are around the place. They'll have to make decisions next week that will impact on the lives of every Australian. And that'll include big calls about taxes, about welfare and health. In order to rein in the outrageous spending of the former coalition government is going to require plenty of winners and losers in the budget. That is always a precarious political judgment. However, there are early signs the government still believes in magic pudding finances. We see that was demonstrated when Finance Minister Katy Gallagher said the budget would increase spending on election commitments, but that spending wouldn't increase inflationary pressure. And today, the media suggested there was a $30 billion handout coming, mostly to those on welfare, to keep up with the inflation. Well, someone needs to remind Katy Gallagher and the government that it was too much government spending in the first place that created the inflationary pressure. That, of course, and the insane decisions to make our economy uncompetitive on areas ranging from electricity to welfare, from manufacturing to employment. Labor's answer to all of this, of course, is that they're going to save on waste and rorts. Well, that both exist in Australian government is beyond question. I've got to admit that. The entire process is littered with waste and rorts. However, how they're defined is actually determined by your political stripe. That's what I expect next week. Labor are going to target coalition policies that impact seats Labor never think they're going to win. And that means they'll be coming for regional communities. Personally, I hope that's wrong, but that's what my reading of the budget tea leaves tells me. One area where Labor have actually made a significant decision is in respect to Israel. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has announced the Australian government will no longer recognise the nominated capital, Jerusalem, for diplomatic purposes. Here's what she had to say.
Today, the government has reaffirmed Australia's previous and long-standing position that Jerusalem is a final status issue. This reverses the Morrison government's recognition of West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Australia's embassy, of course, has always been and remains in Tel Aviv.
All right, in doing so, I think that's blotted her copybook in the role because until now, she hasn't really put a foot wrong. But in my mind, this is a terrible appeasement of extremist groups like Hamas. And even the hard-left Biden administration didn't mess with the Trump-era decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. One of the first serious decisions this government has made is a terrible one. Let's hope it is not a portend of the future. All right, you've seen a bit on Sky News this week about sporting cancel culture. Only this time, it's not the punters cancelling sports, it's the players. A bunch of self-absorbed hypocrites who happen to be good at one sport or another are now determined to bite the hand that feeds them. We've had the AFLW refusing to acknowledge the Queen's passing because of some nonsensical outrage over European settlement. Well, here's news for you, ladies. There wouldn't be an AFL, let alone an AFLW, without that European settlement. And then we've got the Australian netballers this week protesting about Hancock Prospecting, a great Australian company that pays more taxes than anyone else. They're saved, Hancock Prospecting, under the stewardship of Gina Reinhart, saved this deeply indebted sport. And the problem? Well, it started out as a climate change one. You see, big mining companies bad for climate change. Before, of course, the advocates in that space realised what hypocrites they look like, claiming to be virtuous on that score. You see, the netball team was sponsored by a fossil fuel electricity generator and a motor vehicle company. And they're complaining about a mining company because of climate change. Also point out they fly around the world to play a sport that very few people watch. And what about those multi-millionaire cricketers? Do you remember their past performance when they wanted to be rescued at taxpayer expense from the horrors of getting paid millions of dollars in India when COVID hit? Well, now some of them are at it again. This time it's Pat Cummins, the test skipper. Apparently he's got a problem with Cricket Australia's biggest financial backer, Alinta Energy. That's probably the firm that powers his home and all the things that he enjoys. It's that climate change stuff. Again, you see, it's the vibe about it. But Cummins is still happy to stand behind some solar panels made in China by a company that's linked to enslaved Uyghur workers in order to bank a personal paycheck. Yeah, I wonder if he's going to be in the picture when those same solar panels are buried in landfill in a couple of decades' time. Personally, I reckon the Australian people have had enough of this rubbish. Our sport is becoming controlled by woke whingers and public displays of virtuous hypocrisy. Little wonder the UFC is becoming more and more popular, at least in my household. All right, with all that bad news, you might find this information unsurprising, but it's still interesting and rather disturbing, I've got to tell you. The ABC reports that Australia has the second highest per capita usage of antidepressants of all OECD countries. Apparently, prescription rates have doubled over the past 10 years, and one report from the OECD says that over 11% of Australians take antidepressants daily. And while I have no doubt this medication is making a huge difference in many, many lives, it's incredible to me that so many Australians are battling depression. I mean, what does it say about our society? For all the vaunted progress over the years, I'm starting to question, are we really better off today than in decades past? And these numbers, they should concern all of us, not because we don't want to be able to assist those truly in need, but a priority has to be to find out why so many are suffering mental health issues that require medication in this country. We've got to do better on this score. All right, before I get to a first-rate lineup of guests, I have to make a comment on how second-rate our political class have become. Actually, when it comes to the likes of the Greens, and in particular Lydia Thorpe, second-rate, it's way too high a status. This rude, belligerent woman, whom I consider to have racist attitudes and little or no respect for the country that's given her everything from high office, a fat salary, and of course that, much publicised membership of the Qantas Chairman's Lounge, where she's dropped her own standards even further. Apparently, she was hooked up with a bikie boss while also sitting on a committee that was privy to confidential information about law enforcement of bikie crime. During that relationship, the committee members were receiving briefings and confidential documents on the Australian Federal Police strategy to monitor outlaw bicycle gangs, motorcycle gangs, as part of an inquiry into the online trading of illicit drugs. Now, I know, because the lefties have been telling us for a long time that love is love and you can't help who you love. But even a love-struck idiot would know how inappropriate this relationship was. But that may explain why they allegedly regularly deleted messages shared via encrypted communications app Signal. Now, to my mind, Thorpe has regularly demonstrated she's unfit for the office she holds. In my view, the Greens need to boot her from their party. The voters need to boot her out of Parliament.